This is Housebound. I'm Chris.
I'm Holly.
I'm Ashlyn.
I'm Greg.
And you're invited. Welcome to Housebound, a podcast we made because we needed company. In it, we talk about things that are on our minds, and today we're going to be talking about the misrepresentation of STEM in media. So for those of you that are not familiar with it, Holly really loves talking about STEM, so I'll let her explain it really quickly.
Okay, STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. And I mostly just care about the S. Sometimes the T. Math is really hard, so I don't talk about that a lot. And engineering is super cool, but I don't know anything about it. So when we watch television, often Chris has to be like, Holly, it's TV, because I'm like, that doesn't follow the laws of physics or something like that. That's not how that works.
No, that's the entire point of this episode, is to discuss a little bit about that. Like, why is that the case? So I want to start us off by taking us all on a journey. So come with me, if you will, to the place that is inside your mind. You can close your eyes if you're listening. If you're driving, please keep your eyes open, hands on the steering wheel, and envision your favorite TV show. Let's use TV shows. So just picture it in your mind. Build the setting in your mind of one of the core set pieces from that show. Probably it's an indoor location. Those are the easiest. It could be your favorite hospital drama. It could be your favorite science fiction adventure that was canceled from its original platform and then picked up by another at the behest of fans outcrying everywhere. Or it could be a historical comedy. It doesn't really matter. So you have these characters, they're in their setting where they belong, and you have an additional character, let's say one of the core cast members, comes in through the door and greets them all. It's the beginning of a new day. In their hand, they have a simple tray. This tray invokes untold information such as, sorry I was late, but because I was late, I stopped and got coffee for everybody. And as they pass it out, you notice that the actors seem to be a little too careless with these cups that should contain a very hot, very freshly brewed liquid. And yet they're waving their arms and tipping the cups upside down, and the cups are making contact with the counter after they've finished their one sip with nothing but an empty click sound. This is the kind of stuff that drives me insane when I watch a TV show. You don't have to keep imagining it from now on if you don't want to. But if it's peaceful to you, feel free to keep your eyes closed for the rest of the episode. All I'm getting at is that there are these fallacies and inaccuracies in TV and movie media in general. And some of it, I think, has to do with a few deeper issues that Hollywood doesn't like to address, which aren't really serious. They're not serious Hollywood issues. We're talking about like TV shows and accuracy in TV shows. These are not life or death changes, but these are things that I feel like they could address to make the production better. But a large part of that happens to be when, for example, Holly and I are watching a movie or TV show, and we see the representation of technology or science, respectively, because as she's already said, science is her thing. Technology is my jam. Math is okay.
Math is too hard.
Math exists, and that's fine. And engineering can be quite interesting, but neither of us know a lot about it, and it requires a lot of math. So, so what we wanted to discuss was, why is it so hard to accurately portray these topics in media? Why is it so difficult to get somebody that knows something about that topic to accurately write it into the script and communicate that to the actors, because that's literally their job, is to act. So you can tell them how to act and they will do it. Maybe not well, but that is their job. Why is this so difficult? Why is this a repeating occurrence and not just something from when we watch a movie from the 70s and the 80s and they use big fancy words for computers, which don't make any sense? Like, hey, how much RAM is it giving? And you're like, what? Like,
or I need to hack the mainframe.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And it's not just exclusive of old content either. It's nowadays. If you're familiar with a recent release starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and several CG animals who, after I believe an asteroid hits Earth and some scientist takes a sample from the asteroid and grafts DNA or something into these animals, they become supersized and super aggressive and they fight them off. And it's this little commentary in the trailer about genetic manipulation of some sort.
I don't know what they do in that movie. I didn't see it.
No, never seen it. Have no desire to watch it. It looks terrible. Like, for the plot premise alone.
Oh, I'd love to watch it.
Oh, okay.
It looks like a lot of destruction, and that would be fun to watch. But yes, it is frustrating when this is often my beef is, mutation is used as a word in media that doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know if Greg and Ashlyn, do you guys have any examples of things that you've seen that are like this?
Of like wrong science in movies?
Yeah.
Well, as we will have discussed in our last episode about memory, my memory is really low, like at a 3. And that's not for like past, like my past, but actually like media. Like, I can read a book and then totally forget what happened, and I can watch a movie and totally forget what happened. Probably like give it like a couple of months, and I could rewatch it, and it's like watching a whole new movie. So
oh, that's bad.
It's pretty bad. So, well, maybe give it a year.
Little
maybe
goldfish
give it a year.
Greg.
So, but yeah, I don't know if Ashlyn has anything, but like, I did reach out to I called a friend. Because I know that my memory is terrible, but I know that I have a twin whose memory is really good, and he also likes science. And so, I reached out to him. So I don't necessarily need to share it right now, but I do have, a response from him, because this is the closest we'll get to having a guest on the podcast at this point. So
let's do it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right. You're up for it? Okay. These are the words.
What does Mark say?
So I asked him, I was just like, hey, any thoughts on scientific realism in TV and movies? And so you just cut me off when you want me to stop talking. All right.
He has a big, long response.
Just do the first one.
I can't pick one out of this list.
Well, we've got several examples too. Some of them might connect.
Well, how about you go through yours then first?
Okay, well, let's tell you a few of our ideas, examples that we've come up with, and maybe that'll help you decide or narrow down your own observations. Or maybe
these are not my own.
It'll bring up one that you have long since forgotten about. Here are just some general examples, but I will give you the TV show that I remember them coming from. Using the curvature of the human eye to get a reflection of an object out of frame from a still on a video.
What?
That was something CSI New York attempted, which was...
That's ridiculous.
Out of frame.
If the curvature of the eye allows reflections off of it, then in theory, we could zoom in incredibly far to this screenshot or photo of the eye, and we could get detail from beyond what was in the frame. So something behind where the camera was offside. It's painful to watch stuff like this, but CSI does this repeatedly. And I think that there's a whole community of people that just boycott CSI for that reason, because it's so ridiculously inaccurate.
Oh, I have one. In NCIS, I think it was, some cop one. They got sample of DNA from something, and then they used it to extrapolate what that individual would look like, which is utterly impossible. Like, you cannot do that. That's not how DNA works. So and then they caught the perpetrator because they extrapolated what they would look like, and then they could put out an APB for this person with this picture.
Wow.
And it was accurate enough to catch a person that did a crime. Like, don't you think people would do that in real life if you could? We have the DNA. Let's make a picture from it.
Yikes.
Oh, that's crazy.
Accessing a computer program by using a button or command that's simply labeled access the grid or activate, or how on a computer screen there's like a huge chunk of the screen that's reserved for the text to appear that simply says deactivated or activated, or you know, like things that like you would expect if you're just flipping open a random laptop that's supposed to have access to nuclear launch codes or something like that. That this is just, I guess it could be a very specific, like, created laptop just for that reason. So maybe that's where my theory falls apart. But most times you can't simply access something like a server somewhere from just using a payphone and dialing in this like backdoor code and then talking to it. Again, it could be super sophisticated, and that's beyond my realm of knowledge in regards to technology. But also, hacking faster than the other hacker that's hacking you stops the other hacker.
Yeah. How?
Also, people that are in STEM can do all science things. So
that drives me insane.
Yeah, a very recent example of this is from a show that we have recently all watched and loved. Marvel's own WandaVision reintroduced us, I should say, to a character who is an astrophysicist that can also somehow hack government servers because STEM.
Because smart.
Yeah, if you have one ability, you can do all of them.
Okay, but a better example of that is Fringe, the show from what years was that?
Oh man, it was like 2007 or 8 or something, maybe even earlier.
Anyways, they have this one scientist that weird things start to happen. And so the FBI goes and talks to this one scientist, and it ends up that he was the one that was studying this in the 60s. And they did so much in the 60s and 70s, and every single case that's weird, he studied that as well and did so much work with it and is an expert on it. And this is ranging from like, I can capture memory from, or someone's last memory that died, to I can inject someone with one very specific serum and they will mutate into a different thing, into like a non-human anymore, or like just this huge range of things. And every time we watched a new episode, I was like, do you know how long it would take to research something like that? Like your whole life. Like you can't possibly know all of these things.
In their defense, they were all on LSD in the 60s, and so that probably helped them.
That's true.
They probably just never slept and got twice the amount of time to read up on these different procedures and stuff.
No, that is a bad explanation. I do think that the explanation for using science poorly in shows and movies is simply that they would not be interesting if they used it properly.
Yeah, true.
Like if I actually explained how mutations work, and literally that you would either die or not die, and maybe your progeny would be a little bit different, like that would not give you a nice monster to hunt in your show.
I do feel though that there's a movie and a book that is a really great example of where you can actually use pretty hard science to create still like a really interesting story.
Mm-hmm. The
Martian,
yeah,
was a fantastic book, and he put it out slowly so that people could comment, like actual real scientists could comment and be like, "Kate, no, that's actually not how this works," and then he'd like adjust it as he went along. And so it's actually like, if you read it, it's a very technically well done book, very lots of details, but somehow he was able to capture like a really interesting voice in the book and make it really interesting that way. And I think the movie carries over a bit of that realism. I mean, by the end, it gets a little Iron Man-y if you've watched it, but for the most part, other than that, like last scene, it's like pretty good on the science part. So
I agree, but the thing is, that's so rare. Like,
it's super rare.
That movie,
but I'm just saying that's an example that it can happen.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
you can make it interesting,
and I think it's an example that really proves that it can't happen alone. Like, you have to consult experts if you're writing a television show or a book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you cannot know all the things that you want to write about. So you have to ask somebody else that will know. And people just don't. And that drives me nuts.
Have we talked about the whole zoom in and enhance yet?
No.
Okay. Let's
talk
uncover.
about that.
Let's talk about that. Very, very common, very unfortunate use of technology that's highly unrealistic. I mean, I think, Chris, you can probably explain how photos work and screenshots from video camera footage and how well does the I mean, we can see how Zoom works. Zoom seems to be a doable act, but when they say zoom in and enhance, how well do you think that actually would happen in real life?
Yeah, so with footage, as you are probably aware if you've spent any amount of time on YouTube, for example, footage can range quite drastically in quality. And so when we're talking about footage, like imagery, video resolution size, we're talking about the amount of data that's like in the image. And so the larger the resolution, the more the amount of data. And in video editing terms, that means I have more that I can play with. So I can introduce colors and shadows, and I can do different things and make it look nicer or make it look darker and make it look however I really want to. And so if you have a very low resolution, either photo or video clip, or just even like an image, so I guess a photo from a video, what we would call a screen grab or a screenshot, you can magnify that for sure on a computer. And to some extent, you would be able to go, okay, we know that there is this many pixels in the image because it's this kind of resolution size. And so using computer-generated software, we would be able to maybe assume that we know what the pixels surrounding this group of pixels might look like. And therefore, you could potentially extrapolate some kind of image out of that that's a more accurate representation. And they kind of do things like this when they upscale old movies to things like 4K. And so whenever you see a movie that's being promoted as being upscaled or now in 4K when it was a movie that was never shot in 4K, they're taking that and they're adding data to it to make it a bigger picture, essentially, to have more data so that it looks better. But if you were to take a security camera from a gas station across the street from where somebody's getting robbed, and I can almost guarantee you that at very max, that security camera is 1080p. More likely, it's 720 or 480, like introductory dash cam level quality. And you are not going to be able to zoom far enough to get across the street to get a good image, let alone be able to see the brand of the knife that the guy that was mugging the person was using. Like, that is so far, that's so unrealistic. You could hardly do that with the person standing in front of the camera,
holding
let
their
alone
knife up
across the street. Yeah, you know? And so when you know the technology behind or the science behind something like Holly does sometimes, and you can look at the direction that they're going with this explanation and realize this makes literally no sense. Who was it in the writer's room that just didn't pay that much attention to it? And when it's okay, nobody will pay attention. Like,
now at a gas station with a security camera, you might not be able to see who's mugging somebody or whatever, but would you be able to prove that a deer came by that gas station and stood there for a bit and then bounded off?
Yeah, probably if the deer was close enough to the gas station.
There we go. That's what we needed. Anyways. Um,
No, like, Ashlyn, do you have are there any examples that come to your mind of, or do you just not take TV and movies any amount of serious as the rest of us do, and you just take it for its enjoyment?
She takes dialogue very seriously, as we found out last night.
Yeah.
I think where you find most of these examples are in hospital dramas and crime dramas, neither of which I've really seen a lot of. I think the only crime drama that I've seen all the way through was White Collar, which has lots of instances of science when it comes to art forgery, document forgery, and money forgery. But I don't know enough about what acids you can tap onto a painting in order to get the ink to bubble a certain color or whatever, to know whether it was old or not. I don't know enough about that kind of science, so they could be lying to me, my face, and I'd believe it. But I think the problem with these is that the writers are professional writers. And so unless they're writing a memoir, they're writing from the perspective of somebody's job that they don't have that job.
Yeah, for sure.
And even if they have a team of consultants, those consultants are consultants. And they don't actually have the jobs of the people in the TV show or movie who are doing those jobs professionally. Right. So you're always going to have something wrong with it because none of the people in the creation of a film are also crime scene investigators, or else they'd be investing crime scenes and not on the set of a TV show, movie, or film.
Does historical inaccuracy bother you? I know that you've watched a few like Downton Abbey, like historical dramas kind of deal, like when they speak really modernly, like something that they would never say, or have values that are nowadays values that they would likely have never had. Does that bother you at all?
Well, I've never taken any history other than what was required. Which was very little. I am not the history buff, so I usually just believe them at face value if there's something strange that happens in one of those shows.
Okay.
I remember when I try to think of representation though in media, I cannot come up with the name of this book to save myself, and I don't have anything right on me where I could search it up. But Margaret Atwood has a science fiction series. The second book is called The Year of the Flood. The first book is the name of two different characters, but I can't come up with it.
Oryx and Craig or something like that?
That's close. Yeah, I think that must be it. Anyways, in when she talks about that series, she says that it's not science fiction, it's science futurism or something like that.
Speculative fiction.
Yeah, speculative fiction.
Yeah,
there
speculative fiction. Because all of the things that she references, she said, like, we might not be at that point yet, but we will be. At some point, have the technology to be able to do this, that, or the other thing. And so in her speculative fiction, it's often a speculation of what the world could turn into if you use science in this way or that way. And so that was a really interesting series, but she's clearly using technology that doesn't currently exist. So you can't fact check it because we can't do it.
Yeah.
Even if she's claiming that we can one day.
I think I'd be inclined to give that a pass.
Yeah, me too.
It's more so in modern settings when something like zooming in and enhancing on something that couldn't work nearly the way that they make it look like it could. That kind of thing bothers me from a technological standpoint because I don't understand the process of that aspect of zooming in and enhancing because I don't do that kind of work myself. But I do work with some of those same tools, and I know how that could work. So I know enough about it to know that's like there's something at least not right about it. It's not maybe completely incapable of doing that job. It's just definitely it's not going to happen with a space bar and a mouse.
Yeah.
Soundstripe.com is a royalty-free music licensing site that boasts an enormous collection of not just music, but premium quality stock video and studio-grade sound effects, perfect for any creative project you're working on. With over 200 new songs alone being added to the site each month, Soundstripe's commitment to quality ensures that you'll be getting the best selection of music every time you search. Try it for free today. And when you're ready to get creative, receive 10% off your first monthly or annual subscription when you use our unique promo code Housebound10 at checkout. That's Housebound10. Thanks for listening.
What do you think? Okay, so the four of us saw a TV show episode last night, and in the first 4 minutes, they scan a plane to identify the current shapes of 3 humans who were in that plane and exactly what they were doing. They were able to see that 2 of them were pinning one guy down from the outside of the plane while the plane was flying. And the image was in black and white.
Yeah.
So it's not, and you can't do some sort of heat sensor if it's in a flying jet.
Yeah, which is all heat.
Yeah, exactly.
Just be red.
So I think with most of those TV shows, I reject almost every example of science, even if they're trying to portray something that you're supposed to be able to believe, because you can't do that. You can't scan a plane and result in a live footage of the inside of the plane with the shapes of the humans.
I think what gives it credence, though, is that you've seen it before. Like, other movies have done this, and so you're like, okay. You know, like, that's, like, and none of us are in that place where we have scanned or tried to scan a plane. I think if we, like, now imagine, as you're telling us to, okay, imagine yourself actually doing this, and then at that point, we're like, okay, that couldn't have happened. But I think just the fact that, like, oh, yeah, we've seen people be able to see inside things that are unseeable before in movies, and so that just triggers, that memory gets triggered in our minds, and we're like, okay. Yeah. And then we just keep moving on.
Yeah, we're willing to buy into it because we've been indoctrinated by it already. Maybe that's what the writers are counting on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've been brainwashed. Yes.
We've been brainwashed. I think also with that specific example, we've been told previous in other shows that are connected to that they have technology that is not common, that they are really smart and have figured out technology that not everybody else has. And so we like to be like, oh, well, I don't know, like, just the really smart guy made it, which, like, you're still right, Ashlyn. Like, it's still not possible.
Yeah.
We don't have anything that is possible. But because they've got that fact in there, maybe it puts it more into the realm of speculative fiction rather than they're portraying a modern idea of something, but something speculative that only a select group of people have access to. But I don't know. Like, I agree that we're all brainwashed.
And I think with most of those, they specifically don't give you the information you need to prove it false. So it's not saying, like, we're going to do a heat scan. Well,
yeah,
you know, because it can't be a heat scan. It's a flying jet. Or we're going to do an X-ray. That's clearly not an X-ray. You'd have to just be able to see through the outside of a jet.
Yeah, which is all metal. Yeah.
We are going to do an undefined scan of this jet.
Scan it. Yeah. Just scan it.
Yeah. Just scan it. Yeah.
And I think the reason that, and we touched on this earlier, Greg, actually, you were touching on this earlier. I think the reason that these kinds of things frustrate Holly and I so much specifically, and I'm sure other people also pick up on them, though they might not be as passionate about it, is because we know that they can do this correctly. And so if it is an issue of the amount of time it would take to explain the actual procedure of okay, here's a good example. the show Mr. Robot. That show was very, very cerebral in the script writing. And so there's a scene where two characters are talking, and the one is explaining to the other about how they're going to use a Raspberry Pi, which is like a very small computer system, basically. And
I was actually expecting it to be a pie.
Yeah, me too.
oh no, sorry. It's PI. So they're going to use the device they're going to access this HVAC system in this place to destroy these archived data tapes. And so they're basically, so it would be like saying, I'm going to plug this mouse or I'm going to plug this USB into the wall, and this building is not going to know what to do with it. And then the building's going to shut down. And because it shuts down, let's say the fans turn off. And so because there's nothing keeping the system cool, everything gets destroyed. And that's not exactly what was happening in the show. But they go to this great length to explain it in dialogue, which does risk the viewers becoming bored or confused. But if you do it as simply as you're able to, and you have constructed this show that is this more intelligent seeming show in the first place, in theory, your audience is people that would understand this. And so, you would be doing them a disservice by just rushing through it and being like, we're going to plug this mouse or this USB drive into this literal house, and it's going to do something bad to the security system. You know, like that would be just super offensive to your viewers and be like, you're dummies. You would never have any issue with this. But this show has clearly taken the time to do it accurately. Then there's also the movie like The Martian, based on the book. And yeah, while a lot of the stuff that Watney in that story does is maybe bizarre or somewhat unbelievable, it's relatively scientifically sound.
It's at least plausible. Or not plausible, but possible.
Yeah. And so we're going to grow potatoes on another planet using the soil and my poop. And then we're also going to launch myself into space using, math and trajectories and
cheats.
And like all of this other stuff. Yeah. And so it's like,
gosh, I love that movie.
If you take the time, even a movie like The Social Network, there has been a lot of discussion around some of the scenes that you see where people are coding on computers. The code for that, obviously it couldn't actually be Facebook code because then somebody would like steal it and try to replicate it. But the code, rather than just being thrown in there with a bunch of numbers and letters, seems to have been crafted, particularly for the movie, to be legitimate code that would be what that character would be working on based on their position, based on their skills.
Something similar.
Yeah, and so it's that attention to detail that tells us that we know the industry can do it right. And so I wonder if it's maybe a matter of laziness. CSI, the original CSI, had 335 episodes over its run, and that's including like television specials. Can you imagine if they had to consult every single episode every time they did like how fast a DNA sample could be returned, which I'm sure Holly can rant about that for a little bit. Or
they just pop it in there. Pop it in what? The machine they're using doesn't even exist. What is that? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I did read an article about that saying that, like, yeah, you could have your results back in like a day or two in like an extremely fast situation. But we still don't just give the police station the results back just after that, because we still have to verify the results. And so usually it's 4 to 7 days, assuming that there's not a million other people in the queue ahead of you.
Yeah. Goodness.
And so it's very interesting. Can you imagine if they had to consult on that? It would just be a hot mess. You'd never get an episode out. And that's why a lot of these smaller mini series or short form television programs seem to do a better job with it, probably because they have more time and resources that they can dedicate to it. And if you're not writing for intelligence and you're just writing for drama, then you write for drama. you know? So
But that's so frustrating because some of these things, when they're shown to us over and over and over again, like you guys were saying, like the audience is brainwashed into thinking, well, that could happen because I've seen it in lots of other things, is like the actual effect on society that this will then have when people think that that could happen. Like being frustrated with the justice system, that things are taking so long because they don't have a good idea of how long something like even a simple DNA test will actually take, or thinking that their food that has the word GMO on it will actually change them because they've seen in television that if you inject yourself with DNA, because that's all they have explained, from some other animal, that you will suddenly grow fins and be able to breathe underwater.
Sounds
like,
great.
Sure, maybe if you want to be the monster from Shape of Water, but like...
Yeah, and it happened to Harry Potter too, so, you know.
That's magic, not DNA.
That's GMOs. That's GMOs.
No. But like... people actually believe this or don't know that they believe it. They're like, oh, I don't trust GMOs. And you ask them why. And they're like, I don't really know, but I think maybe it could change me. And you're like, why do you have this idea at all? Like, you eat DNA all the time. That's what everything is made out of that lives. And so how are you a carrot? Have you ever eaten a carrot? You're not a carrot, so it hasn't changed you. Like,
you turn orange if you eat too many carrots, Holly.
That's not from its DNA, Greg.
You are what you eat, Holly.
That's from its carotene.
Oh, okay,
which is a pigment.
I'm turning into a carrot.
Which just means that you're loading your body with pigment. Which would be the same as if you colored all over yourself and you loaded your skin with pigment. Anyways, it frustrates me that if you're writing for drama, which has probably the most viewership in media, because it's the longest running shows that exist, basically, like, that's fine. I get the reasons why they do it, but also, shouldn't they have some responsibility in what they're teaching people and the kind of like misinformation and fear that they could possibly put into people? I don't know.
There are so many policies and protections in place for creators, whether on a website or TV or movies, in regards to advertising. And advertising simply makes people money. And so if there's that much attention given to advertising, you would assume that when it comes to STEM topics, there would be that much more of an aggressive push from these communities going, no, you're going to represent us accurately because A, we want to be looked on in favor, of course, like every industry does. But B, we want people to not have misconceptions about it. Like, we want people to be interested enough to want to come into our field. So I wonder how many people get into, like Holly was saying, get into a job and then realize, oh, maybe this isn't cut out for me because it's not as exciting as the drama made it look like it was. And definitely all of the science behind it is not as quick or as painless as it may seem for TV when you have to push it, when you have to cram it all down into a 44-minute time slot plus commercials.
Yeah.
Are you guys cool if I read some of Mark's thing?
Yes, please
Cool.
give us some of his examples.
All right. So first off, Mark has an example from WandaVision. So Darcy said she detected CMB, cosmic microwave background radiation, coming off of the Hex. CMB is radiation that was created in the early universe, and it by definition has no single point of origin, hence why it is background radiation. And yes, she's able to detect exactly where it's coming from, right? So also there is nothing special about CMB photons. They're just photons of microwave radiation. And the reason CMB is microwave radiation and comes in the frequencies it does is because the universe is cold. Any dark object with a temperature of around 2.7 kelvins, so that's degrees Celsius above absolute zero, would radiate at similar frequencies. The hex, notably, is not 3 degrees above absolute zero. It's room temperature, which is literally hundreds of degrees hotter and would produce a completely different set of frequencies.
That's fair. I'm also frustrated by the way that media uses radiation, because it's usually like, I walked into a radioactive area and I am immediately dying. No.
Mm-hmm.
It will just cause mutations in your body that will give you cancers. Like, you don't just fall down and start throwing up blood. Thanks, TV.
Yeah. So here's some of his other specific examples. He says specific examples aren't easy to think of, but I can start listing things that include common mistakes. So he says sound in space, falling into water from a great height without dying.
Yeah.
Ant-Man's powers are supposed to come from being able to shrink the distance between atomic nuclei and their orbiting electrons. But if that were the case, he would weigh the same and would be so dense he would crack the tiles on any floor he walked across. And then he says, I can always come up with more of these, ... And then he lists some more. So a lot of sci-fi wormholes are depicted as funnel-shaped, even though they would look spherical from the outside.
Oh, that's really interesting.
In the Daredevil movie, Matt Murdock can hear and dodge bullets that are moving faster than the speed of sound. And then,
yes, that's good.
That's a very good one.
Yeah.
I think probably the one example of that's close to that was when Holly and I thought it would be terrible fun to watch the Blade trilogy. And
I love Blade.
I think it's in the second or the third movie, somebody makes a comment about how many rounds per second. How many rounds per minute, or the distance that these rounds per minute that are fired from this weapon could go. And it's something like 60 times the speed of sound, or like, it's some insane, unrealistic.
It's ridiculous.
Like, it's movie nonsense. And again, it's like you wouldn't even have to make that up. You could literally just take a weapon that exists and use its specs.
Yeah, or like just up it a little bit, like the fastest weapon, and double that, and then at least that's like relatively believable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess when you're in a world where you're hunting vampires, then you've already completely suspended disbelief. So
no, I haven't. Just about vampires.
Just about vampires, not about. Yeah. And then he says Bruce Banner, and in brackets, and most shapeshifters, honestly, in bracket, violate conservation of mass. However, one instance I remember of actually good physics is in the first Avengers movie. When the Hulk tries to pick up Thor's hammer, the hammer doesn't react because magic, but the floor under the Hulk's feet starts to buckle.
Yeah.
I just thought that was a nice attention to detail. And then his last little bit is, though I will say that since things like wormholes, time travel, and laser swords don't currently exist, I am more willing to cut them slack for not being realistic. Though some movies' time travel rules only make sense if you don't think about them. End quote.
Those excellent thoughts.
Mark Reimer, everybody.
Yeah.
Honorary member of this episode of the Housebound podcast.
Of the Housebound podcast. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That was something that I was trying to think of. I was like, physics in movies is always terrible. And then I specifically thought of the Fast and Furious franchise, where the cars do outrageous things. In the newest trailer, they shoot a grappling hook that somehow catches the bumper of the car, and the hook doesn't just rip off the bumper like it should. It swings the car all the way to the other side of a cliff.
What no. You're misremembering the physics in that scene. There is no grappling hook. Right.
It's just something that catches on the wheel or something.
They drive full bent for leather at a falling rope bridge in the middle of nowhere. And they break the bridge in such a way that when they fall towards the ocean in their death, the bridge that has now been broken wraps one of its rope ends around one of their tires, pulls it taut, and swings them in the direction that they go with enough speed to shoot them back up into the sky. so that it can release them and they can fly towards this like helicopter or no, it was a plane. It was a plane that had grabbed a car earlier. So
Yeah.
But dang if that music doesn't sound good in the background while they're doing it.
It's all
right?
very exciting and like I want to watch it absolutely. But what should have happened in that scene? Like A, the rope bridge doesn't catch them. They fall to their death. B, the rope bridge catches them and breaks more and they fall to their death.
yeah.
C, the rope bridge catches them, doesn't break, but pulls off their axle and they fall to their death. D, none of those things happen and it all catches perfectly and they don't get put all the way up into the air but slam into the bottom of the cliff at the bottom and they are all dead. What am I at? E.
Yeah.
None of those things happen, but it doesn't let go at the right angle. And so it pulls them back and smashes back into the other side of the cliff. F. None of those things happen.
I got one. Okay, F, they just decide to just break before the cliff and redecide their life decisions in that moment.
No, that doesn't happen in movies either.
Oh, come on. That would be
That doesn't happen in real life either.
Perfect ending. Then they probably would get shot down by the helicopter anyways. It's all about life or death, right?
Like,
you gotta risk it.
Yeah, there are so many physics things wrong in that scene. But yeah, I like Mark's sci-fi ones because they were excellent.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I agree it would be very boring without it, and that's probably the direction that they go with skipping over deep explanations in TV shows, is because it would be boring with it.
Star Wars would be okay because of the cool orchestral music in the background, you know? Like, they just keep that going. Doesn't matter if there's no sound or explosions.
Well, one of the shows that I was always really impressed with, well, there's two space shows that I have been impressed with that have a multitude of other issues. Not saying that they are perfect at all, just get that little caveat in there. But Firefly doesn't have sound when they're in space. They very specifically make it really quiet other than what comes through the radio, which is fun. And then The Expanse also does quite a good job of like, if something explodes, it might explode, but the fire goes out right away because all of the oxygen is used up immediately or something like that. The Expanse also does quite a good job of radiation poisoning, which I was ranting about earlier, in that what's happening to them when they're like on Eros getting irradiated is also part of like something with the alien stuff rather than the actual radiation itself. And the radiation poisoning that happens to them that Holden has to live with for the rest of his life is like, oh, you know, the cancers just keep popping up and I take my anti-cancer medication and now I'm fine because it's the future. But he has to continue to do that because they continue to pop up. And that's exactly what would happen. It would irradiate cells. As they would replicate wrong. And that's exactly what cancer is. And so you would just keep getting cancers. And then you would die eventually because you had cancer. So like super interesting that you can still make it interesting by doing it right if you want to. But
yay, science.
Yay, science.
Well, yay, science, boo, representation of it.
Misrepresentation of it.
If there's any examples that you can think of that you feel either show us that Hollywood can do it correctly or just terribly botch it, you can always email them to us at thehouseboundpodcast@gmail.com. Our episodes go live every couple of weeks on anchor.fm/housebound, but we also post on the off weeks on Facebook and Twitter and sometimes Instagram. You can also catch our episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you enjoy what you're listening to, please go ahead and rate us or subscribe to us on that app or service. So thanks for joining us this week, and we'll talk to you again soon.